The Door to Nowhere by Edward Peeler Jr. "Let me see Bebop," said David as he reached to grab the action figure from Charlie. "He's so cool, I'm gonna get him next week along with Rocksteady." "I think Leatherhead's my favorite," said Charlie. "Gators are awesome." "Those are cool, but this guy's the best," said Spencer, holding up Baxter Stockman as the mutant fly creature. "I've been saving up to get him. I've already got the Mouser." "You think he's gonna be in the movie?" said David. "I hope so," said Spencer. "We gotta see it next week when it comes out." "I don't think they're gonna have Baxter, but I'll bet they'll have Krang and the Rock Soldiers. It's gonna be like the first couple episodes. And the Technodrome," said Spencer. The kids continued to talk Ninja Turtles as they walked home from the toy store near the park. The Technodrome was so cool to Spencer. The idea of this big mechanical fortress with a weird, creepy eye at the top. The look of everything in his favorite show was so strange and awesome to his young mind. He had just turned 10 this week, and he felt his birthday money was well spent on his favorite mutant mad scientist. Spencer looked at the lush trees on the side of the road, excited for the upcoming live-action Ninja Turtles movie. Jim Henson had worked on it, and the Turtles looked so real and lifelike in the promos, and there was this cool rap song in the commercials about it. He and his friends started singing it as they walked. T-U-R-T-L-T, power, T-U-R-T-L-T, power, T-U-R-T-L-T. Something reflective and shiny caught Spencer's eye, blinding him for a second. His eyes focused again. "Hey, what's that?" "What's what?" asked David. "That!" pointed Spencer as he ran toward it. In the center of a grove of trees, there was a large oak. Spencer had passed this tree many times, on his way home from school, and it just appeared to be an old tree with a hole in its side, probably home to a nest of squirrels. But this time it was different. The tree was gone. In fact, much of the wood of the tree was gone. It still looked like a tree, and was shaped like a tree, but the north side was made of a smooth gray metal. In place of the hole was a large red wheel, kind of like the ones used to get in and out of bank vaults in old movies. Spencer looked closer and realized it was a door. He noticed the outline of an arch circling the wheel. The outline was made of a black plastic. Further, the metal ended in some kind of bright purple, stuttering light that looked electrical, and beyond that, the tree was wood again. He looked behind the tree, and he could no longer see the purple light, or hear the buzzing it made. In fact, the tree was wood on the backside, looking like it had always looked. But when he stepped back in front of the tree, the purple light returned, and there the tree was metal. Above the wheel on the door, there was a glass window, and through the window was darkness. "Guys, look! It's a door!" Spencer looked back at David and Charlie, and noticed they were pale with fear. He couldn't get over his excitement, though. "Dude, what is it? Where does it go? Let's check it out." He reaches for the wheel. "No, don't touch it!" shouted Charlie. He runs up and grabs Spencer's arm and pulls him back. "Come on, man, don't be scared." "Spence, I don't like the look of this thing, man. I think we should just go home," said David. "How can we go home after finding something like this? Trees don't just grow metal doors. Where could it lead to? Come on, let's check it out." "No," they both said. Both boys grabbed Spencer and held him surprisingly firm. "Guys, let me go! I want to check it out!" "What's going on over here?" They looked up to notice an old police officer approaching. "We found a door in a tree," Spencer said excitedly, pointing at it. The officer stared at the door for a moment, and then looked at Spencer. "Yeah," he said, biting his lip and looking back at it. "I think you kids better run home. I'll call it in. Probably nothing. Saw a couple of film students out here earlier. Probably a prop for a movie. Y'all run along now." "But wait," Spencer protested before being dragged back to the sidewalk. "Just forget about it, Spence," Charlie said dismissively. "Gives me the willies." "Okay, look, my mom's gonna drive us to the movies." Charlie went on talking about their plans for the weekend, but Spencer stared back at the tree. The cop was on his walkie-talkie, apparently reporting the weird door. He seemed angry, but Spencer couldn't tell why. Spencer barely touched his spaghetti. His mouth was too busy moving to put his favorite dinner in it. His mother listened intently about his discovery on the way home from the toy store. He described the door and its strange features, the weird crackling energy, how it seemed to disappear if you looked behind the tree. His father had said nothing before standing up to make a phone call. "I mean, Mom, how does that even happen?" he said. I don't know, honey," she said, not sure what to say. "I mean, where does it go? Maybe it's like a magic door. What if you open it and it goes to like another world?" "No, honey, I'm sure it's not that. It's probably just some weird prop like the policeman said." You know, they say the simplest solution is often the right one. Yeah, maybe, I guess. He looked down and stirred his spaghetti, disappointed. As he rolled some pasta with his fork, he looked up again. But what if it is a doorway to another world? Like to Narnia, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Or maybe it's like a top-secret subterranean elevator like the Technodrome or something crazy like that. I need to check it out tomorrow. I mean, maybe it is, Spencer. You have a wonderful imagination. I don't want to take that away from you, but I think you should leave that door alone. Probably belongs to those film students. You'll get in the way. Maybe I should drive you home from school for a while. But, Mom, I can... That's probably for the best, his father suddenly returned to the room. Jimmy just told me that whatever's going on over there, they're blocking off the entire park, so it's best we give you a ride, son. I'll pick you up and your friends up tomorrow. Great, it's settled, said Spencer's mother. You'll ride with us for a few days. Spencer frowned, disappointed. The door was so exciting, and you might not be able to see it again. What if when the park was reopened, it was gone? He just wanted to see what was inside, but it felt like the world wanted to keep it shut. He took a bite of his spaghetti and thought about it. Maybe there's a way he could see it again, but he'd have to be clever about it. His mother changed the subject and began asking his father about the case he was working on at the courthouse. Small talk between his parents went back and forward. When they addressed Spencer again, they asked if he needed a ride to the movies for the weekend. He said no. Charlie's mother was going to pick them up. He sat there and ate his dinner thoughtfully. A few hours later, his mother hugged him tightly, more tightly than she usually does. Spencer felt embarrassed, but hugged her back. I love you, sweetie, said his mother. Love you too, Mom. Night. He lied down on his bed and stared at the ceiling. He couldn't get the door out of his head. The teachers hadn't noticed Spencer slip away at lunch. He had enough time, he thought, to take a quick look at the door and head back. He could make up any story he needed for why he was missing. But no one was going to take this away from him. Maybe it was a movie prop, maybe it was something more. Regardless, it was awesome. He didn't know why no one else could see that. He ran his way to the park. He was so close to the tree line. He noticed some cars up ahead, so he slowed, catching his breath. Maybe they were shooting the movie right now. Maybe he could see what the door was being used for. It was going to be so cool. Charlie and David were just going to feel like the biggest chickens for not checking it out when they had the chance. He was excited, and gave himself a second wind, sprinted to the tree line. He looked to the tree. His eyes went wide. The tree was gone, but the door was not. It had gotten bigger. At least he thought it had. Spencer wasn't sure what he was looking at as his eyes adjusted to take in the scene. The tree in the center of the grove was completely missing, as the door, or at any rate, the metal attached to the door, had expanded. In place of the tree was a massive wall of metal, expanded to the right, blocking the large chunk of forest, almost as if it had been erased. At the top of the wall was that same strange purple light that pulsed with electricity. He couldn't see over or around the light. It was just as if that was where the wall ended and the sky and the forest began. There were wires and strange machines lining the wall. There was pictographs or hieroglyphs in several spots next to these machines. Spencer looked at the ground and noticed that the wall had expanded there as well, and much of the grass and earth had been replaced by a metal floor that ended in jagged half-circles of purple sparks. There were a few cars nearby. One was a police car, the other a pickup truck that looked like it had belonged to a contractor, maybe an electrician. But there were a few other vehicles that Spencer didn't recognize. At least he thought they were vehicles. They didn't have wheels, but looked like there was a place where maybe someone could sit, but no chair back so you could lean back and fall off if you weren't careful. He wasn't even sure if they were vehicles, but they were definitely machines. Maybe all this was part of the movie, maybe some kind of science fiction film. But there weren't any cameras, or what would normally look like a crew. There were a couple of people standing around, the same police officer from the other day, a handyman, and a few other people. The one thing that united them is they were all holding small, clear objects that looked as if they were made of crystal. They were examining the wall and waving the crystals on the wall and the various machines. Occasionally, they would speak to each other. Their words came out as gibberish with an echo. They would gibber and show each other their respective crystals and point at different points on the wall. Finally, the police officer pushed something on his crystal and held it up. Suddenly, the wall shrunk and disappeared. The trees of the forest, including the big oak tree, were all visible again. It's as if the wall had never been there at all, and there was no sign of the door. The policemen spoke more gibberish to the others. They all pressed something on their crystals, and in a bright blue flash, they were all gone. All except the policeman. He was about to re-enter his patrol car when he noticed Spencer out of the corner of his eye. The boy's mouth agape in shock and bewilderment. What had he just seen? The officer turned and faced him. Suddenly, the officer's jaw dropped in a natural length, and a siren-like screech came from his mouth. Spencer turned and ran from the park as fast as he could, the siren shriek of the monster cop following him. He ran back into school and grabbed the teacher. "There's a monster in the park!" he yelled, terrified. "Spencer, calm down. What are you talking about? They were messing with the door. They were turning the park into some kind of mechanical wall." "Spencer, stop making things up. Did you leave school without permission?" No one believed him, not even the other kids. He was sent to the principal's office, and his parents were called. While the principal was talking to his parents, he looked out the window and he saw the teacher he had asked for help walk up to a police officer. It was the same police officer. The policeman no longer looked like a monster, but as they talked, he pulled out his crystal and began pressing something on it. The teacher pulled out a crystal of her own and did the same thing. After a moment, the teacher looked up from the crystal and talked more with the policeman, looking concerned. The teacher was one of them. What were they? Were they aliens? Maybe they had come from the door, and this was an invasion into our world. If the police and the teachers are aliens, they must be covering their tracks. No wonder no one believes him. What are they doing here? How many people in his hometown are really aliens? He realized he can't trust anyone. But this teacher had been working here for years. Did the aliens take her over? Is that what they were doing, or what they were here to do? Replace everyone on Earth with a look-alike? Or were they infecting them and taking over their minds? And did this only happen recently? Or had these creatures been here for years? His parents took him home and drove him to the park. They pointed at the trees and the big oak and assured him there was nothing there. No monsters, no wall, no door. Everything's okay. He must have imagined it all. They didn't punish him when they got home. They just seemed concerned and made him dinner. His mother gave him a big hug. Again, before sending him to bed. But Spencer knew what he saw, and a growing unease had settled over him. He waited till about 3 a.m. Spencer carefully snuck out of his room and went to the garage. He got a couple of his dad's tools and a flashlight. He was going to go back there. There had to be something left of what the monster had done. Maybe he could figure out what they were planning and stop them before the whole town was taken over. Before he left, he stopped by the kitchen on the way to the back door. His bike was back there, and he used it to get to the park. Something shiny caught his eye coming from his mom's purse on the table. He took a look inside. One of the crystals was in his mom's purse. Spencer had to stop himself from crying out. His mother was one of them. Without thinking, he grabbed the crystal and ran for the back door. He leapt on his bike and started pedaling as hard as he could. He flew down the street heading for the park near his house. As he rode, he noticed his neighbors were out late. An old man was standing in his yard at 3:30 in the morning, watering his lawn, glaring at him, and following him with his gaze as he rode by. Spencer's pulse quickened as he pedaled faster. There were more people out late watching him. Before long, he saw a crowd of people, as if under silent instruction, moving silently to block the road in front of him. He was too late. They had taken over too many people. Spencer swerved to the right down an alleyway. He knew his way around his hometown pretty well. Screw the main roads. They're not stopping him. A little girl in the crowd unhinged her jaw and screamed that siren shriek the policeman had done before. Spencer could hear the sounds of hundreds of footsteps behind him. He sped faster down the different alleyways, zigzagging to confuse the monster people. The siren screams grew louder and more numerous, and there was a wave of sounds of things tearing and spattering behind him. It sounded as if there were more footsteps, so he pedaled faster. Occasionally he would catch a glimpse of something running down the neighboring alleyway, very fast. Each time it was something tall like a man, but it looked like it had many legs, scuttling by. Sweat dripped into his eyes. He feared they were almost on top of him. A large, fat, bald man suddenly lunged out of the back door of an apartment and grabbed him, yanking him off his bike. Spencer kicked the man in the stomach. The man pitched forward and he yanked his right hand free. He grabbed his flashlight and smacked the man in the face. A small, high-pitched shriek came from the man's mouth, and then a blue, ropey arm ripped out of the man's chest. 3 fat, sticky fingers wrapped around his right arm and held him fast. The man's jaw dropped, and he shrieked and turned back to the way Spencer had come. Spencer kicked the man again and yanked his hand free. Grabbing his hammer, he smacked the man twice, once more with the flashlight and once with the hammer. The hammer sank into the man's eye. Blood and a light blue goo erupted from his head. The man clutched his face and shrieked, stunned. Spencer grabbed his bike and pedaled quickly away. He made it to the park. He sped right for the oak tree. He left off his bike and ran to it. He looked around for any sign of the door or the purple electricity that he had seen before. He couldn't see any sign of it. He noticed and felt around the oak tree to see if he could find any sign of what had been there. The sound of the creatures behind him thundered and shrieked and grew to a roar. He was crying. They would be upon him soon. Then he saw it, a purple spark, right near the big hole in the oak. When he had seen it before, that's where the wheel had been. But now what? What could he do about it? An idea came to him. He pulled out the crystal he'd taken from his mother, or the thing he thought was his mother. He pressed its surface. Nothing happened. The roar grew louder. Oh, come on! He pressed different parts of it. Still nothing. He looked back and could see those scuttling shadows again. Come on, goddammit! Spencer smacked the crystal with his flashlight. The crystal cracked and part of it sank inside like a button. The crystal grew hot and glowed a bright green. The purple sparks expanded and the forest disappeared. The park was gone. There was nothing but a huge metal wall with the door in front of him. He grabbed the wheel and began trying to turn it, but it was stuck and hard to move. The roar was directly behind him. He looked and cried out at what was behind him. There were hundreds of blue creatures behind him. They were tall with blue porous bodies, but they stood on 4 legs like a centaur. Their legs had backwards knees like a cricket. They had 2 arms at their sides like humans, but they ended in crab-like pincers, and there was a long tentacle that flickered about that came out of their chest that ended in 3-fingered hands. Their heads contained no features other than a large eye and several tentacle feelers circling the outlines of where their faces would be. One had a large puncture mark in his bloodshot eye. That one took a step forward, and the others followed its lead. Spencer panted in terror and turned back to the wheel, twisting as hard as he could. The wheel gave, and he turned and turned, feeling the tightness of the door give. He was almost free. Spencer, no! Please stop! He turned back to see his mother reaching out to him. Tears in her eyes, she turned back to the creatures and put up a hand in front of them. They stopped without a word and stepped back. She looked back at her son. Spencer, don't open that door. You'll die. Why do you care? You're not my mom. You're one of them, he said. They're not going to hurt you. Please, you don't understand. You were never supposed to know. Know what? How long have you been on Earth? What are you things doing here? Honey, listen, please. She tried to take a step forward, but Spencer tightened his grip on the wheel. She stopped. This is going to be a lot to take in, she sighs. But listen, you're not on Earth. What? You've never really been on Earth. This is a very large spaceship, and all of this, she waves her hands around to the trees and city. It's all a simulation. What? No, that doesn't make any sense. No, you're invaders. This is my home. Go away. Give me back my mom. No, it's true. That's not a normal door. That's an airlock, and it's damaged. There was a small collision with an asteroid which has damaged it and caused the simulation to be disrupted. That's why you can see and interact with it. The door hasn't been repaired yet, so I need you to... How long have I been here? Honey, we're never supposed to figure this out. Now please, don't call me that! Tell me, how long have I been here? She took in a deep breath and hesitated, and then finally spoke. We took you from your real mother shortly after you were born. We created the simulacrum of your planet from an earlier time for you to live in. You were never to know the truth until one day when you ripened, and then you would ascend. Ascend? Ascend into what? You things took me from my real mom and have been lying to me my entire life? He looked at the crowd of 4-legged creatures and noticed 2 smaller ones, about his size. Their pincers were holding the action figures of the Ninja Turtles he and his friends had bought earlier, a Bebop action figure and a Leatherhead. 2 smaller aliens stared intently at him, and with their single eyes, one of them suddenly made noises similar to the gibberish he had heard the policeman speak earlier. It was directed at the woman who had claimed his entire life to be his mother. She looked back at it and nodded. I will. We have no choice now. She looks back at Spencer. Spencer Bennett of Earth. We are the Titrani. We are an old race of travelers that was exploring the stars when your species had just discovered fire and was lifting itself up for the first time. There are many wonderful things from our world and throughout the cosmos that I have seen. I've wanted to show it to you ever since I was ordered to raise you and act as your mother, but I was ordered not to. Our kind was created by a great being known as Tetrazor. Upon hearing the name of Tetrazor, a great vibrating echo emanated from the Tetrani crowd as they in union bent down on their four legs, covering their eyes with their pincher, and raising their pincher skyward. Tetrazor made us and raised us up as his chosen people, to be vessels by which his will was done. It has given us everything, but it is never to be disobeyed. Once every 100 of your Earth years, we are to come to your planet and take a child chosen by Tetrazor, and to raise it on this ship. The child is never to know that it is off-world, and the child is to live a happy life until Tetrazor calls to us in dreams. Then you are to be brought before him. This is ascension. What happens to the children who ascend? A rumbling vibration rose from the crowd of Tetrani. Spencer could see them looking at each other and murmuring in their alien language. His mother looked down before answering. We don't know. She looked Spencer in the eye. Every child we have sent to Tetrazor has never returned. So, you're just fattening me up to feed me to some kind of space monster. There is much we don't know about Tetrazor. We know there are other beings like him. Some say the children we send to him are raised to his level and become beings like him. Or he needs you and others for some grand purpose. He whispers to us in our dreams. Everything we do for him has a greater impact beyond what we can understand. You may be the child that holds our universe together. You can save the world, Spencer, or all worlds. That would be really cool. Or a giant space monster's gonna eat me. I mean, come on, none of these kids come back. How do you know I'm not just food for this thing? Maybe he wants me for something else bad. I mean, you just admitted you don't know. I can guarantee that you'll be protected. I will. How can you guarantee me anything? You don't even know what's going to happen to me. Spencer, you don't understand. We must obey Tetrazor. Your ascension must occur when the time comes. We can feel him always. His will must be done. If we fail him, he will destroy our world, our entire empire. He will hunt us down and annihilate us and tear us from the stars. You have to go to him when the time comes. I'm sorry. She looked at him pleadingly. We can make everything like it was before. You'll never have to see or think about any of this your entire life. Please come home. Just please don't go through that door. He loosened his grip on the wheel and looked into the window, staring into the darkness. Did you ever really love me, Mom? He looks back at her. Her eyes began to well up, and her words came out in a choke. I didn't think I would. But yes, I do. If you love me, you're not going to send me to that thing. Spencer, I can't. I have a duty to my people. Please, just come here. Spencer tightened his grip on the wheel and turned hard. Bye, Mom. He yanked the door open. His mother's cry was drowned out by a large gust of wind that yanked Spencer through the door. Spencer was pulled with so much force that his arm struck the door, breaking it. No noise came out of his mouth, and as he cried out in pain, he shot into the darkness. His body felt hot and cold all at once. His chest hurt as the air in his lungs tried to burst through his chest. He blew out his last breath as to stop the pain, but the rest of his body began to throb. Spencer was terrified. He knew he was going to die, but it was better to be dead than to be fed to some monster. He tried to look back as the pain grew. He saw a light shine off a giant metal orb that blinked with lights and turrets. It took him a second, but he realized it was his home, the starred ship the Tetrani had raised him on. He could see some of the Tetrani flying through a hole in its center, other aliens that were pulled out with him. There was a great big eye floating over the orb. It looked like the Technodrome. Cool, he thought. His lungs cried out for air and he began to burn. He looked up at the eye and realized it was attached to a large black orb. The orb had large spikes coming out of it that occasionally crackled with electricity. The orb had hundreds of holes, mouths, lined with teeth. And there were several large tentacles stretching out from it. He could see a bright light, a sun in the distance behind it. The large eye looked on to him, and all the mouths opened as if in a great scream. But there was no sound. The tentacles shot toward him, and were so long they nearly grabbed him. But he was flying away from the object so fast that it just barely missed. Thank God, thought Spencer. That must be Tetrazor. I don't want to go with you, man. He noticed liquid swelling in the eye. Was it crying? Did it really mean him no harm all along? Or was it really just looking forward to eating him or whatever else it had planned? Too late to find out now. His lungs burned. As he gasped, his body throbbed with pain, ready to burst. He was going to die in a few seconds. He knew. He looked away from the creature to see where he was going. There were hundreds of stars, so bright in the darkness. Above him, below him, stretching out forever. Beautiful, he thought. Then there was darkness, and nothing more. The creature that had raised Spencer, that had taken the role of his mother, regained consciousness. The force of decompression had knocked her against the hard ground, and she'd blacked out. She awoke to see a hole in the forest, or the illusion of the forest. The decompression had caused a larger tear in the ship's bulkhead, taking part of the exterior wall and the airlock itself out into space. A shimmering, transparent green field covered the hole, preventing her and the rest of her crew from joining her adopted son in the cold vacuum of space. She looked out into the stars to see if she could find him, but he was already gone. The ground suddenly shook underneath her, and the illusion of the human city began to flicker on and off, being replaced with a massive metal chamber and advanced Tetrani machines. The Tetrani were scrambling in panic, rushing to battle stations and shrieking orders to each other in their siren voices. The creature's mate, Spencer's adopted father, knelt down in his human disguise and helped her up. "My queen," he said. "Tetrazor is angry. He's attacking the ship. We've already lost several decks. We need you on the bridge. We need to... Ah! Ah!" He cried out in pain, and quickly the queen felt it too, as a high-pitched whine pierced into her skull and grew louder as her head throbbed. As the pain grew worse, she could feel a great, terrible consciousness she had only known in her dreams, and its thoughts overwhelmed her own, as its message entered her mind. "You have failed me, my children. You do not know what you have done. The human's ascension was needed. Without him, what you call reality will be disrupted in ways you cannot imagine. I shall remove all life from the crust of your world. The galaxy shall be purged of all Tetrani. I shall begin anew, for the twilight of all worlds has begun." The ship continued to shake as several other explosions rocked the vessel. Klaxons and alarms echoed throughout the ship. The pain eased in the queen and her mate's mind, and their thoughts were their own again. "All is lost," her mate said. "Head to the bridge, and I will follow," she said. "We have to try and save our people." He nods, trying to regain his composure. He looked at her one last time, and turned and ran toward command, shedding his human form as he did. The queen looked into the blackness of space through the force field, as her ship shook and cracked. She had hoped to gaze on the human one more time, but he was lost to the void. What was left of him was floating out there somewhere. She had never thought she would care for this creature as she had, but she did. Spencer was her son, and now he was dead. Her god was about to destroy her world and her people. The end of the Tetrani was about to come to pass, and there was no point in trying to stop it, because her world was already gone. She rose to her feet carefully as the ground shook. "I love you, Spencer," she said one last time. She turned and shed her human form forever and ran to the bridge to do what she could, for whatever it was worth. The end.